Hello and welcome to the Switch for Good podcast. I'm Alexandra Paul, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Dotsie Bash. I say wonderful every week, but it's because that's how I feel about you. But I think I need to get some synonyms.
Figure out something else I am.
That won't be hard. So anyway, Dotsie, we have an old friend of yours here. And so the audience is going to be really interested in what we have to say because we're going to cover a lot of topics today.
Yeah, we've been looking forward to this for a while, haven't we? Yes. So, let's just reveal who it is. It is Academy Award-winning director Louie Psihoyos. And Louie and I met, I still can't even remember whatever the year was that filmed Game Changers, which feels like 10 years ago, but I think it was like 4, something like that. And when I first met with James Wilkes and decided, they wanted to shoot my story. So we shot it in the Velodrome up in LA. And I went up there with Kirk and was just, feeling relaxed and excited to do this interview. And all was well. So I walk in and they put me in place and turn the cameras on, and Louie's behind the main camera, and I just froze. Like, I was so intimidated. I just hadn't registered it yet that this is
Was it the camera or Louie?
It was definitely Louie. I'm pretty cool with the camera. So for like the first 10 minutes, he was doing, Dotsie, it's okay. You're fine. Just relax. It's all good. It's like, Bausch, pull it together. This is not cool at all. So anyway, I think I pulled it together, right, Louie? Like, we finally got a couple of good things out of me.
I had no idea you were nervous.
I know you did.
That's how good you were.
I can say, as a watcher of the Game Changers, you were awesome.
I did pull it together,
Yes,
but
you
I
did.
guarantee you that
didn't
first
look nervous
15
at all.
minutes is not in there for this reason I'm describing. But man, let me get you guys up to speed on those who do not know Louie well. Definitely, most recently, obviously, know him from the Game Changers. But Louie is a visionary director, photojournalist who is really just not afraid to push any boundaries ever. That's what he's made of, and his work just always is pushing to confront reality and the truth the way that he sees it. And in my opinion, that's always what leads to change, right? That's always the precipitative for people making new decisions in their life that are better. And Louie focuses a lot on planet Earth, this blue ball that we're all spinning on that we better wake up and take care of, or it's not going to be here forever. Louie spent 17 years with National Geographic, which allowed him to deploy his craft as a vehicle for creating this awareness. His later career spans, book writing, editorial shoots, the co-founding of the Oceanic Preservation Society, which is they do incredible work. And he's known for the Cove, racing Extinction, and the Cove specifically. He won. The team won. It was the best documentary award.
The Oscar.
Yes, the Oscar, the gold Oscar. Cooler than Olympic medal, I tell you.
I don't know.
I think.
I think you should just put your silver medal against his and all your golds, because you've got a ton of championships and stuff in gold, and his Oscar and his,
We'll be like, diet change, people. This is what can happen. The other thing that I'm very grateful for and very proud of is as Louie and I got to know each other, he was kind and generous enough to direct all 4 PSAs that we have put out at Switch for Good. Back in the very beginning in 2018, when we put one together in about 4 weeks, right, and landed on the closing ceremonies of the Olympic Games, and then the most recent ones that we shot before COVID took over in January. Thank goodness we got, and they're running right now.
Yes, and they're great.
And so that's that was just I think out of the love for what kind of change we can make, right? Because he's not that commercial directors aren't fabulous, but he's a little bit more of a real film director. So I think he was just being kind and
it was a coup to get him,
to me, yes, to do these. But we had loads of fun. I mean, I think he enjoyed the journey with the athletes. So, Louie, let's start with Game Changers and go backwards, if that's okay with you. Yeah,
let's do it.
You have a fascinating journey in life. So a lot of people listening to this probably have seen the film. If you haven't, get on board, watch it. It's on Netflix. What was different about this film for you than the previous two that we've just mentioned, The Cove and Racing Extinction?
Well, I wasn't in it. That's the main difference. Thank God I wasn't I wasn't in front of the camera for the Game Changers. Actually, I have one little like Alfred Hitchcock moment where I show up when Patrick Baboumian is carrying the crew down the road on this thing called a yoke. So one of the world's strongest guys carrying the team, and I thought this would be like one little piece of the film I could actually sneak into. But no, what's different about that film is, the first two films, The Cove and Racing Extinction, were mainly talking about I'd say the plight of animals and plight of the environment, and the Game Changers was much more about solutions than the previous ones. And we talk about the problems a bit in the Game Changers, but we do it kind of at the end of the film after you've sort of been indoctrinated onto what the problems are. And we did that very purposely. We looked at the data. What's going to get people to change? Here's the deal: the plant-based diet has been stuck at, just a few percentage points of the population for quite a few decades. And there's, as you know, there's funders that have spent hundreds of millions of dollars looking at like what's wrong with this. It's the best diet in the world. You can live the longest. It's better for, alleviating habitat destruction, species extinction, freshwater pollution, a lot of climate change, and it's better for human health. Why isn't it being adopted? And we were stuck, it found out, because people were talking, not getting people where they're at. The people weren't going to change. Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't going to change diet because of animal rights. I know that hurts a lot, but what we looked at the data and said people will change if they look at aspirational athletes and they do it for their own personal benefits, their health consequences. And we sort of reverse engineered the film to fit that model. So instead of making a film that might make us feel good or feel right, we made a film that was going to be effective it was really data driven. And, we still have to make an entertaining film. You still have to have amazing characters such as yourself, but you still, we were primarily concerned of what's wrong with this, the way that these films have been made in the past. And so we looked at the data and really architected for that, to try to have a positive outcome. So it's all like, when you look at the way the film's constructed, it's really about upgrading your life and putting things, dispelling this myth that to be big and strong, have endurance and virility, you need animal products. It's the most dangerous myth in the world, bar none. Mm-hmm. I think, and the second film that we had worked on was called Racing Extinction. It's about the Anthropocene, the age of man, the sixth mass extinction on the planet. And people would always ask, it was really kind of an overwhelming problem when you think about it. People always say, what can I do? What can I do? And then when James Wilkes and Joseph Pace, the two producers, came to me with that story, I thought, this is a really great way to talk about a solution. Mm-hmm. And so that was it. It was just trying to figure out, like, how do we address all these big problems and make it entertaining, still do everything that we do, make films and try to change the world, through social change at scale. And that's what we did. It's attacking the same kinds of problems that we did, solution orientated, and but data driven. I think it's much more data driven than the previous ones.
Well, you're right that this actually does provide the solution to the two others, The Cove and Racing Extinction, in that men killing things for their virility and their masculinity is one of the reasons that so many animals of the sea are killed. Shark for sure. You talk about that. We'll talk about that later in the show. And it's all about the penis, really, in terms of your Game Changers helped men who care so much about their virility, and I support that, but this is a way to do it in a compassionate way, right? It's sort
Yeah,
of
absolutely. Yeah, it taught us how to have a strong penis too. So that was
Yeah.
like a little side thing.
I was thinking about this. There's this scene in the film, but it's probably all we had to do.
Yeah.
We probably just needed like a 3 or 4 minute YouTube. We didn't even have to make the rest of the film because we do this experiment that's kind of famous now in the film. It's not a scientifically validated study. We don't have that big of a group of people, but it's a very strong signal. So we take several collegiate athletes who are healthy, I would assume very, masculine down there. And we basically give them a plant-based diet and then measure their nocturnal erections on something called a Rigiscan. It's basically a computer that straps to their leg and then has these two coils. One goes to the head of the penis, one goes to the base of the penis and measures nocturnal erections. And these aren't anything to do with wet dreams. A normal male in the course of an evening will have about 6 to 7 nocturnal erections in the night, and that's just to keep an important part of our reproductive system healthy. And men, a lot of people probably don't know this, but erectile dysfunction is an early sign of heart disease. It's all these problems that we have, diabetes, strokes, heart disease, are all cardiovascular problems. Are plumbing essentially. I'm simplifying this a lot because I'm not a doctor, but oxidative stress and chronic inflammation is all exacerbated by animal products. And the first thing to really get clogged up, one of the smallest arteries in the human body, or the male body, is their penis. So we wanted to do an experiment. What happens if you take healthy males and give them a plant-based diet, measure their nocturnal erections, and then give them a meat-based diet, and just after one meal. And we've only did this over the course of 2 nights, but when you have a really strong signal like we got in that film, it should send shockwaves to anybody that thinks you need animal products to be virile. Basically the upshot is that the difference between a plant-based diet and a meat-based diet just after one night, the males had a 350% longer duration erection, 3.5 times longer, and a 10.4% bigger, harder erection on the vegetarian meal. And so it's really, it shocked everybody. And I've seen that scene literally hundreds of times now at film festivals, and when you're editing, you're seeing things time and time again. But that scene is just so funny just to watch the reactions of the other men in it, as they're looking at the data. It's kind of embarrassing to talk about, but when you see them and reacting to it, and the results are just so out of this world, it was game changing.
We've had a few.
I think there's so many men and women have told us that the family changed because of that, because it's a real problem. We joke about it, but if you're in bed and you can't get it up, and why, and the women out there probably know, it's really debilitating on both sides, right? Women don't feel like they're sexy enough, and the men don't feel masculine enough, and the solutions are so simple. In fact, a plant-based diet is at the nexus of everything we care about, right? It's like human health, sexuality, fresh water, all those things we listed, species extinction, habitat destruction, climate change. It's all you can change the world by changing what's on your plate. And by the way, it's all an upgrade. It's not. And then I think after you've seen all the benefits, then you can say, oh, by the way, animals are suffering by the billions, maybe the trillions every year when you include fish, because of this myth, this myth that you need animal products to be big and strong. That's when things start to change. And the craftsmanship of the film, and I'm just the director. There's like I said, James and Joseph, who brought the film to me. We had great editors, we had great music, we had across the board. We try to get the top people in the field working on the film. In the first 9 days, the film was on Apple iTunes. It became the most watched documentary or independent film in their history. The first 30 days, it was on Netflix. Searches for a plant-based diet went up 350% worldwide. So the film has had this massive effect through the population. Exactly how many people have seen it so far, we'll never know, because Netflix doesn't release that data. It's just part of their standard operating procedure. But we know that tens of millions of people have seen the film. And the one thing that we had heard is that Australia was the country where it had been seen the most per capita. And I just did Kyle Voigt, who's the biggest funder, Tracy and Kyle Voigt. They have an animal sanctuary up here, and he's the founder of Cruise, this General Motors self-driving car company. I just went with him on a trip around the world. He was trying to be the fastest person to run a marathon in every continent, and he did it.
Oh, wow.
But we ended up in Australia on the last leg of the tour, and he went back somewhere, and I was exhausted just like filming him, run around the world literally in less than 4 days. And so I stayed in Australia because more people had seen the film there, and I was just curious. So I would walk around town and start talking to people. I talked to the bellhop. He said, I said, do you have a good restaurant where they have vegan food? He says, oh yeah, up the street, but have you seen the film The Game Changers? And I said, yeah, I'm the director. He said, oh, that film changed my life. Me and my family became vegan. Everywhere I went, I couldn't find a single person in the 2 days I was there that hadn't seen the film, except there was one guy that I worked with at the United Nations who I had lunch with, and he told me, I haven't seen your film, but I'm going to have to see it, because if I have a dinner party at my house and it's not vegan, nobody's going to come.
There you go.
And that's amazing, because Australia is a very macho society. They're men.
Yeah.
They like their whatever on the Barbie, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, but it's counterintuitive. But for some reason, it's rippling through the culture. So the impossible is possible, for sure.
Yeah. Back to the penis. We have had 2 or 3 docs on the show that has shared with us that if you have erectile dysfunction and you go to your doctor and they prescribe Viagra, that if they don't say now go see your cardiologist, that they consider that like a form of malpractice. And so we've asked them, I can't remember, a couple weeks ago we had a doctor on, we were asking exactly why it is that area is affected first. And they were saying that the vascular system down there is so much more narrow. It's the narrowest in all of our bodies. So it's a lot wider, the system getting the oxygen to our heart and our lungs and places like that. So that's why it's like that first indicator that's what's going on. And I just think that is, and for women too, although, I really do think that you need to do another film and do the test on the women. We've talked about that before. I don't know if it's going to happen, but we matter too.
Can we stay on the penis for a little bit longer? Your film Racing Extinction was a fabulous film, very moving, and you were very moved in the film. I remember you standing there, I think, seeing all these shark fins in front of you and just being yourself moved. And tell us about what are the animal cruelty in America. We want to eat meat, that makes us feel virile. Men feel virile. In other parts of the world, they want to eat things that we think are crazy, like shark fin and rhino horn. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because culture makes a difference. Mm-hmm. And these are cultures that don't eat red meat like we do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, there's one of the seeds you're talking about. In China, there's something called zhenbu, and it means basically you're trying to get qualities of the animal that you're eating. And so, in other words, if you're eating something that's stiff and hard, like a rhino horn, or maybe a snake that looks penile, you'll have it's supposed to be good for your erections. And if you eat a bat, you can buy bats at the markets. That's if you eat a bat, or actually eat bat shit, like in a tea, that's supposed to be good for your eyesight, because bats can see at night. So for glaucoma or night vision problems, you eat bats. That's why bats are in the market. And like Guangzhou, that created SARS in 2002, 2003, we went to that market, and you see all these animals that are for sale there. And that's one reason that it's one of supposed to be the attributes of shark fins, is that you eat something that's stiff and hard, you have an erection that's hard. But zhenbu is what got us into this problem. There's bats in the market. They get in contact with other animals. Then it's called a spillover effect, where you have these animals that normally wouldn't be together, and that's why you have it coming out again. You would think that in China, 4 months after SARS, the first SARS in 2002, 2003, they banned consumption of animals for about 4 months, and then when it was declared over, they released them again. But during that whole time, you could still buy those same animals for Chinese traditional medicine. So I think until we face that problem, like why are these animals in the market together, until we get rid of the live markets, you can expect, this to be the age of pandemics. And by the way, it's so, not just to rally on the Asian culture. By the way, you're going to have more of those spillovers happening when you have these mixed species coming together. But, that's not to say that all of the, a lot of the pandemics, they're swine flus, they're bird flus. These are zoonotic problems. Even, HIV, somebody cannibalized a chimpanzee in Africa, and that 25 million people died. Ebola, same thing. These are zoonotic diseases. As long as people are eating animal products, I'm doing a documentary right now. It's part of it is on pandemics, and when you talk to the epidemiologists, the virologists, they say the same thing. So we've been warning about this forever. That it's inevitable. It's not about if it's going to happen; it's when. There's books over on my counter here, 15 years old. They're talking about the coming age of pandemics, and when they were writing these, it was pre-SARS, a little bit post-SARS, but they saw this coming. There's a disease out there that a pandemic that they're trying, or it's an epidemic now, they're trying to tamp it down. It makes the current COVID one look like a summer cold.
Is that the swine flu? Is that the swine one?
It's a swine flu. I think it's an H1N1 that has about a 50% mortality rate. In other words, it's a flip of a coin whether you die or not. And they're tapping them down, these pandemics, all the time, all around the world. And it's from what we're eating in the West, not just in Asia. But of course, when you have these other species coming in and spilling like a coronavirus from a bat to another species, these middle species, that intermediate species are the ones that get infected. But the reason that they're there is because all these animals are in the market alive together, and you have them defecating and urinating and spitting, and they're really stressed out, these animals, because they're in cages on top of each other. It's a perfect storm for creating epidemics and pandemics.
But just to be clear and even-handed, it could happen here in our factory farms in the United States too, where we crowd so many species like cows or pigs together.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The Spanish flu wasn't actually the Spanish flu. It probably started in Kansas, and they called it the Spanish flu because back in World War I, Spain was neutral. And they reported, the French or the Americans didn't want to report it because it would have caused a backlash against the war. So they let the Spaniards report it, but they called it the Spanish flu, but it had nothing to do with Spain.
Yeah, we carried it overseas when our boys went to Europe in World War I from Kansas. So people don't.
Yeah, and then it was, the virus was traveling at the speed of locomotion or the speed of ship travel. Now, of course, it just takes one plane load to infect an entire population. But 3/4 of these pandemics we have are zoonotic. If you want to stop pandemics, the best thing to do is eliminate animal agriculture. That's the culprit. Simple, plain and simple, right there.
Mm-hmm. Game Changers is another solution to that too.
Yeah.
Right? Game Changers is the solution to every one of your movies.
Well, yeah, but I think talking about human health is really I mean, listen, who does not want to get rid of this thing, right? It's endless. But hopefully, it gives us a chance to talk about this. If you're talking about a way to change the world, and we're all in the same basket now, right? Everybody's doing the same thing. Every country is on lockdown, or parts, a portion of lockdown because of somebody, eating bats or having bats in a marketplace. I know there's people out there saying, oh, it's caused by a virus released from, Bill Gates or a lab. But listen, I've been to the markets. I've seen how these things work. A lot of the epidemiologists have. The simplest thing to happen is like when you actually see them in the market and they're there with other animals. That's what's going to cause the disease, not some. The epidemiologists I've been talking to said that there's no way you could concoct a virus to do what this thing has done. We're just not that smart.
Right. Giving us
can
way
do a
too much
better
credit.
job.
Yeah. Louie, I'd love to go back a little bit. You have a fascinating life story, and you were the youngest photographer hired by National Geographic to hold a full-time position there. And your story and your history, obviously gave you this incredible eye for storytelling, but also over the years created this incredible passion and desire to unravel what's happening and then, of course, like we were talking about, the solution of how to fix it. So you got the job in 1980, I think, at National Geographic. And there's a couple of stories that you've told me, both of which I hope you'll tell our listeners. One is in 86, when you actually went with National Geographic to a slaughterhouse. They let you in back then. That really was the precipitous that helped you and made you change your diet. And then also the Nat Geo story that you did on garbage back when recycling kind of wasn't the thing, and how that blew up.
Yeah. 1980. There was I was working at National Geographic as an intern. I won a contest called College Photographer of the Year. It's a worldwide contest, and the winner gets to work at like a 3-month gig at National Geographic. So it wasn't a permanent job, but I wanted to work there since I was a kid. And I proposed a story on garbage and recycling. There's only one mandatory recycling program in America in 1980, and I thought this is just it's a sin that we're throwing away all this glass and bottles, and there's no recycling programs for it. So I proposed one, and they gave me a job gave me a contract, and I did a really good job on that. It became the most, by readership surveys, it was the most popular story of the year. So they hired me. Now, I always imagined myself doing subjects like that, to sort of use photography to advance culture, to try to create culture change. And it worked really well with that story. Remember, it's not like I did the story on garbage and recycling, then it took off, or that it changed the world. It become part of a chorus. There's some really good evidence that shows that you need 10% of the population 100% committed to a cause or an idea, and you can create this cultural change, this shift. So you don't need 51% of the population to shift, and we can talk more about that. But back then, National Geographic had 11 million people that got the magazine. 4 people saw it. So it's like 44 million people saw National Geographic, and it starts to, you get very close to that number. They say in Hollywood that you need about people to hear about your film about 6 or 7 times before they'll actually see it. And that's why they do bus stop ads and billboards. And, in LA, they have the big building size, posters on the sides of buildings and your favorite star in the magazines, because they know if they don't hit that 6 or 7 number, people having those amount of impressions, they won't come and see your film. And with the documentary, it's really hard to do that. But with cultural change, so seeing that garbage on the cover of National Geographic was groundbreaking. But here's what happened, though. Geographic said, "Oh, this kid can make garbage look good," and so they hired me. But then I started, they gave me all the difficult assignments. I started to veer away from really what gave me joy, which was trying to use what talent I had to try to change culture, to try to solve their problems. And so what it did is it made me feel good that I had a great job, that it was, National Geographic, it's a great career, but it wasn't giving the kinds of stories I was doing. I was proud of, but they weren't really, I got off track because, I succumbed to, the idea rather than what was making me happy. And so every time I would try to quit, and they'd come back and double my salary. And I became very well paid, but it still wasn't, ticking those boxes of what I really like to do. And so in between, like one of those times I actually quit, I started working for Fortune magazine. And that's when I was actually at Fortune magazine that I did the story on the cattle ranches. It was the biggest independently owned cattle ranches in America. And one of them was so big it had their own slaughterhouse. and I'd never seen a slaughterhouse before. We had a big slaughterhouse in Dubuque, Iowa, where I was from, and I had an uncle that worked in a kill line, but I never saw behind the scenes. But I'd been there to pick them up with my aunt, and I knew it was horrible. You could hear the animals screaming and stuff. But the 1986 was the first time I was actually inside of one. And I don't know why they let us in, but I was there for several hours. And, I know why they say if slaughterhouses had glass walls, nobody could be eating meat. And it's pretty devastating. This kill line, it was like I said, it was a big ranch. They killed about 500 animals, 500 cows a day. And they put a captive bolt to the brain. It's basically like a pneumatic slug that goes out and is supposed to crush the brain and kill the animal instantly. And one of the animals wasn't killed. And the first thing they do is they hang it upside down and they strip off the skin. And then they starts to go around in a kind of a conveyor belt, and people are carving off different pieces of the animal as it comes around. And this one cow was still alive. It was looking at me upside down. And as it turned around, as it was moving on the conveyor belt, I could see its head moving and its eyes were looking at me. And I thought, I can't be part of this, but I still thought I needed it. I need to eat animal products to be, strong and healthy, have virility, just like everybody else did in 1986, or most people did. But I still ate fish. I was still okay, I'll just eat what I think is the lowest animal on the sentient scale in my head, and I won't at least be part of that industry. And of course, then when I made the Cove, I found out that I had mercury poisoning because I was eating a lot of fish back then. That's all I was eating for animal products, and not really true. I was eating dairy, which was awful, but that's another story. But but that was the last piece when I found out I had mercury poisoning. Fish, it depends on where you eat in the food chain, but there's about 6 trophic levels to the food chain. Starting at, let's say, plankton, and you go up every time you go up a notch, you go up an order of magnitude. So there's 1 million times more heavy pollutants in say tuna than there is, let's say, in plankton. So I found out I had like off the charts mercury poisoning, which my short-term memory was failing. I had body aches, a whole litany of things that disappeared when I stopped eating fish, when I just finally took those off the menu. But it wasn't, I imagine everybody that whatever reason you quit eating animal products for, there has to be some sort of a shift in your consciousness, or either you're doing it for, I'd say a consciousness awakening or a health awakening. Mine was health. I wished, part of it was the beginning early signs were because of, I didn't want to be part of that industry. But it was my own ignorance that allowed me to eat fish. But it was really the health that really made me switch over, because I had 45 times higher than what the U.S. medical industry considers high, 44 times. And I met my first vegan down in L.A. when we were at the Academy Awards, and I'd never met a vegan before. I thought, what a lunatic. And I said, I remember we were eating at a dinner at the Chateau Marmont, and I said, "What do you eat?" And she goes, "Everything else. All protein begins with plants, and that's where you get your nutrition from. That's what most people think of as taste, is actually what the plants, what you're putting on, the steak." I never liked the taste of meat myself, or chicken, but I liked all the accoutrements that go on top of it, the condiments. But that was kind of the shift to veganism was, after the Cove. That's how how that began.
I know you've mentioned that with the Cove, and it's obvious in the film itself, how it was very dangerous, what you guys were doing, especially the divers. And if they had gotten caught, I wouldn't want to think even about what would happen to them. What do you remember in that period of time? What I think it's very brave, all of you, to make that film, to unravel that truth. What were you thinking about, and what made you just keep hammering forward, knowing how dangerous it was making that film?
Well, once you start to understand what's going on in there, Rick O'Barry, who's the hero of that film, our protagonist, Rick O'Barry is the guy who captured and trained the 5 female dolphins that collectively played the part of Flipper for the popular Flipper TV series when I was a kid, and he did that. Was in that industry. He's probably the highest paid trainer in the world, a dolphin trainer. And then he had a reckoning. In the film, we talk about it where, the primary dolphin, one of the 5 dolphins that primarily played the part of Flipper, he called her Kathy. And after the TV series, went away, all the animals went back to the Miami Seaquarium. And he had heard that Kathy was very depressed. And so he went to go visit her. Now he's no longer working the TV series. He's no longer a trainer at the Seaquarium. He sits at the edge of the pool, and the way he tells the story is Kathy swam up into his arms, looked at him in the eyes, and then swam down to the bottom of the tank and didn't take another breath, drowned herself. Every breath that a dolphin take is a conscious effort. They have to make a conscious decision to breathe. It's not like us. We're automatic air breathers, but Kathy didn't. And so I guess to, show how depressed that she was, she committed suicide, if that's what you want to call it. And so that's the turning point of Rick and in the movie. And it was a turning point for me too, I think, when I heard Rick's backstory and I saw him at the Cove. But back then there was only, one person that was there. Rick was the only person that was there when I was there that was protesting what was going on at the Cove. And the Cove, by the way, for the people who haven't seen it, it's the place on the planet where they're killing more dolphins than any other place in the world. The secret Cove in Japan, in Taiji, Japan, this little tiny city. It's near Kyoto. It's about 4 hours south of Kyoto. And I really just want to, you start to hear Rick's story about how sentient, intelligent these animals are. And you see them swimming around the tanks in this town, and you see what they do to them. You don't, at that point, at the early point, we didn't know what happened. Nobody really knew what happened inside the Cove until we snuck in with cameras and placed them there. But I just wanted to help them because I felt sorry for them, and I wanted to help these animals. I felt like if we could just get in there and show the world what went on, because we didn't know ourselves. And then once we saw what went on, what we did is we placed, for people who haven't seen the film, is we had about 5 cameras that we could hide inside of these fake rocks. I work up at Skywalker Ranch now, but this is Industrial Light and Magic. This is Lucas's place. And back then, now they do everything with CG, computer graphics. Back then, they still had a mold making department where they made the props, that were real. And so we had them build these fake rocks that we could hide cameras in. We had 5 of them in there. And what we did, these are the first hard drive cameras ever made. There were prototypes. And so back then there wasn't even a way, they had hard drives, but there's no way to take that information back then and put them into a film. We had to wait for almost a year. We put those hard drives on ice, just in closets, until they invented a system so that we could take it out and put it to edit it. So, but when we saw the playback on these, so we sneak into the Cove, we place the rocks there, and then the next day we sneak back and take them out. But when we started to see what went on there, saw how they were killing them, we thought, oh, the world should know about this. And that was the drive. Once we started to figure out what they were doing, we realized that we could have maybe a way to help shut this down. Now they're still killing. This is 12 years later. They're still killing them in Taiji, Japan, but they're killing far less of them. In all of Japan, when we started the Cove in about 2006, there was I think 23,000 dolphins and porpoises being killed for human consumption every year. And I think about 2 years ago, the last time that we have results, I think they killed 1,610. So it's about over a 93%, maybe 97% drop in dolphin deaths because of the activism around the film. So the film had this profound effect with, on the culture there. And by the way, we didn't. I think it's obvious to everybody that sees the film that it's pretty horrible what they do to dolphins there. But the people that are in the industry said, well, you kill cows, pigs, and chickens, and pigs are pretty sentient. And to that, I've got to say, you know what, you're right. But the Achilles heel for dolphin meat is that it's all poisonous. All the dolphin meat that's been tested in the last 30 years in Japan has anywhere between 5 and 5,000 times more mercury than allowed by Japanese law if it was a fish. Of course, there's a loophole that, because it's a mammal, that allows it to be used for human consumption. Back then, they were actually force feeding it to school children. But it takes a little bit of explanation. But in Japan, you can't bring your own lunch to school. You have to eat everything that they serve you on a plate. So when they serve pilot whale, which is a dolphin that's toxic, everybody had to eat all of it. And so when we talked to the Japanese press, Rick and I, and people in the group, we try to use the word mercury in every sentence so that they can't edit it out. So it just becomes a sort of mental gymnastics game when we talk about, we just keep on bringing it back to mercury because that's the Achilles heel. You can't get around that. You can say, oh, pigs are pretty sentient. We say, well, yeah, that's true. But, by the way, come over here and protest the killing of pigs as well. We do it here, too. We're not species-centric, at my organization. We're trying to fight for everything. But one thing you can't argue with is there's no reason that kids should be eating poisonous dolphin meat. In fact, now that's stopped as well. So, films can have a very, very powerful, profound effect on culture. And the Cove, had a huge effect in Japan, even though the right-wing nationalists over there that protested it, they like to think that, or they claim that the film wasn't that popular. But, every time they threw something at us, we turned it around to use the negative press to turn it into a positive one. We were scheduled to be in about 26, 29 theaters, I think. And then they would show up in these black shout trucks, these dark, ominous, like SWAT team looking vans with these big speakers. And they'd show up in front of the theater and start, chanting slogans. And that causes the theater owners to be ostracized by the local neighborhood, right? Like, why are you showing this movie? It's bad for our business. And so they try to put political pressure in that. And they made the mistake of pulling up to with these shout trucks to our distributor's home. He wasn't home, but his wife and kids were, and they started harassing, the wife and two kids at his home, and she ran out the back door. It's all captured on television. And that really was the worst thing they could have done, because it sparked this national debate in Japan. Like, what is it about our culture that we won't allow this film that's criticizing our industry to be shown? And that created this whole other discussion. And so every time they would throw something out at us, you figure out a way to sort of twist it so that it becomes good news. And it's one thing I've learned about activism is you can't afford to take ads out, but you can afford to be smart and use the press to your advantage, or social media to your advantage. And now we have at our organization, we have about 2.5 million people in social media, and they're all pretty active and interested in this topic. So, like when Blackfish came out, another film about wasn't dolphin hunting, but it was about one orca that had killed 3 people. Now, there's never been a wild orca known to kill a human being in all of human history, but one captive one kills 3 people in his lifetime. And I saw that film when it came out at Sundance at the premiere, and I remember going up afterwards and telling the producers and the distributors that we're going to be the best thing that ever happened to you, because we have, at that time it was only at 650,000 people, but they were really interested in this subject. So we helped them with the campaign, and our organizations did great work. And SeaWorld stock really hasn't really recovered ever since then.
Just a note, those dolphins that are captured in Taiji, yes, they are for dolphin meat, but aren't they get much more money if they're sold to places like SeaWorld and these aquariums and these hotels who have these dolphinariums. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. Like a dead dolphin for dolphin meat is only worth several $100s, but a trained dolphin is worth $250,000.
Right.
To some, and SeaWorld isn't taking them anymore. Like American SeaWorld isn't taking those animals anymore. But there's, they've propagated and spawned hundreds of other facilities around the world that now will take them. I was just in Russia for the whale jail. They had about 100 belugas and orcas that were caught there illegally for the dolphin trade, mostly in China. And they had, at the main dolphinarium, they had dolphins from Taiji. So it's still going on, but it's an ongoing war. The Cove and Blackfish has been really, really great for the activism about shutting it down dolphinariums in the West. But now with China, Japan, the Middle East, Russia a little bit less now because of the activism that just happened over there. I was there doing a story on the whale jail. I was in Moscow, and then Putin did his annual address to the Russian people, and he announced that he's going to release the orcas from the whale jail. And I was there doing a story on that, and then we flew to Vladivostok that night, and became part of the crew that could document them being released. But so
what
I
was
think
that
it's
like?
hard.
Tell us about that, because we all have fantasies of releasing all the dolphins from every single jail around the world.
Well, that was a good story, and it was ongoing. But really, that was like, there's a lot of other activists that were working on that story. Philippe, Jean-Michel Cousteau had petitioned Putin. And that started, Pamela Anderson, who has talked to Putin before. There's a lot of celebrities that got on board to try to put political pressure on them to release him. And through a lot of activism, it started, and a lot of great, by the way, a lot of great groups from within Russia too were working on this issue. And it's one of the great feel-good stories of last year, I think, environmentally, is that Putin reversed the stance. Now he's not, at least on paper, he's not allowing any more animals to be used for captivity.
How many were released then at that time? How many did they have?
I think it was 101. They had about 11 to 13 orcas. One of them, I think, died in captivity. Of course, they said it escaped. And the rest were belugas, I think like 89 belugas, something like that.
Does that belie the sort of argument that once you capture an animal, you cannot release them because then they'll starve to death?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Once they're too far, and there's other people who can talk a lot better about this, but these animals were only about a year out of, they were, first of all, they were all caught wild. And they were going to try to release them back to the various regions where they were, where they were caught. So it was fairly specific. They released them within, 60 to 80 miles of where they were originally caught. So, but if you had acclimated them to human, feeding for, several years, it'd be harder to untrain them, right? Especially the young ones. What's going on now is there's very few animals, let's say at SeaWorld, that are actually wild caught. Most of them are propagated. So these animals, I mean, to somebody that doesn't know what's going on, because you think of you see 6 orcas in a pool, you think, well, they must all be able to talk to each other. But if they're wild, they don't know. They're talking different dialects. They don't have mothering skills. There's a female orca it's the bond between a female and a baby orca is probably one of the strongest bonds in the animal kingdom. A male orca will never get like more than a body length away from his mother its entire life. It's except when it goes to procreate. So these bonds are really strong. When you take those away, and then let's say that animal that was born in captivity, it doesn't know how to raise its own progeny. So a lot of times they'll kill their own. They'll just, they're so depressed. All these animals they're being fed depressants. They're being starved to perform.
Are the depressants to keep them calm, or what? Why are they
antidepressants? Right?
Antidepressants, because they're
okay.
depressed. I mean, they have this huge brain. Like an orca brain is way bigger than ours, hugely bigger than ours. And it has more spindle neurons. The spindle neurons are associated with our ability to process complex emotions. Now you put them in basically solitary confinement. A concrete tank at SeaWorld is like us being, at the Miami Sea Aquarium where they have Lolita. I filmed that, and it's, it's like a living room. But, for an animal that can swim 100 miles a day and dive down to 600 feet and, and feed, and now it can't, it's not even as deep as she is long. These animals, it's like solitary confinement for us. And it has no other members of a species. They throw a couple of other dolphins in it. Like, that's like, that would be like, throwing a couple kittens with, into a cell. It's just off the charts what these animals have to endure. So yeah, they give them antidepressants to make them cope with the horrible situation in the end. And if you go to SeaWorld, they'll say, well, these animals, we treat them well. And I think they really think that they treat them well, but I don't think they put themselves in. How can you put yourself in the position of an animal that doesn't have any kind of culture, doesn't have any other animals of its own species to talk to? How do you, give it a couple fish and give it some tricks to do and say that's going to be the mental stimulus that it needs to be an orca? I mean, Jacques Cousteau said the educational benefit of putting a dolphin in captivity would be like learning about humanity by only watching a prisoner in solitary confinement. Mm-hmm. And, I think when you take an animal out of the wild and you teach them to do tricks for our amusement, it says more about our intelligence or lack of it than it does theirs.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Can we stay with water and go to fish now? But you had you ate fish for a long time. So you might understand why there's so many people who choose to eat fish and feel good about that because they're not eating land animals. But you know quite a bit about overfishing and things. I heard you on an interview talk about it. Can you talk a little bit about the how everything we're shifting quickly about what fish are healthy, are sustainable to eat and what aren't? Can you give us an idea of what's going on in the ocean so that people who are eating fish might have a better understanding?
Yeah, I mean, after we started, the Oceanic Preservation Society, during that whole period, I thought, well, there's an overfishing problem, and one solution is to, if you're going to eat fish, eat animals that are more sustainable or healthier. And we probably gave out in the first few years that OPS was in operation, we probably gave out more seafood guides from the Monterey Bay Aquarium than anybody. We'd order them by the boxes. And after a while, the more you learned, the more I learned about the problem, that it wasn't really an overfishing problem per se. It's like we're eating fish at all. It's first of all, we know it's not great for you. We know that, that I think there's a myth that it's sustainable, and you look at all these populations of fish, everything that we've ever fished, there was plenty of them where we're just working through the species, we're working down to the bottom. And, I can't propagate that myth anymore. It's not healthy for us. It's not healthy for the fish. It's not healthy for the environment. So I'm not a proponent of sustainable fishing. I'm a proponent of not eating fish at all. And of course, back when I wanted to get off of animal products, I thought, well, fish aren't intelligent. They're not as sentient. Maybe they don't feel as much pain. Now we're finding all that to be a myth as well. Fish can count. Fish recognize each other. There's when we did Racing Extinction, the working title of that film, I called it The Singing Planet, because just about everything in the world is singing. We're just stopped listening. And even it turns out that fish are singing. I live here in Sausalito, California, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge, and there's for the first 3 years I was here, I was living on one of the floating homes here. And there's my girlfriend who works in sound design has way better hearing than me. We'd go to sleep. Now these are boats. These are floating homes, and they're fairly shallow water. So on low tide, they would actually sit at the bottom, and high tide comes up. You float. And about 3 a.m, she wakes up and she's like, "What is that sound?" And it sounds like a electrical transformer buzzing. And I remembered this story, and it was like there's a midshipman's fish. It's the mating call, and they burrow underneath the boat and start humming. And can I swear on this program?
Sure.
No.
I think you already said SHIT, so go ahead.
So she can't sleep because this fish is like, making this humming noise below us. And so she says, somebody fuck that fish and we can get some sleep.
Or hopefully another fish will do that and not.
Well, a lot of people don't understand that fish have communities and lives, and they have very sharp sense of smell. And what do you think about fish farming? Because that's a solution that people have for sustainability.
Oh man, I actually dove in the fish farms in Japan, and there's stinky messes. These animals are all misshapen and full of tumors and cancers. I mean, literally almost all of them. Because I don't know what goes on physically, but they're basically swimming, or even though it's like in an estuary, it's not getting the flow that they would get. So they're swimming in their own excrement. The food is. Here's the other thing: I was at a tuna farm, right? And this is the Bluefin tuna farm. This is the first at Kinky University, and it was the first. It was the first experiment to raise bluefin tuna, which are really pretty skittish. Like if you shine a flashlight in them, they'll all run into the net, and then they can basically kill themselves. So they figured out a way to raise these animals, but they were shoveling mackerel to the tuna, like these. So they're shoveling wild caught fish to farm raised fish, and I would ask, like, how many pounds do you need of wild caught fish to raise 1 pound of tuna? Is it 14?
Oh God.
So so these were mackerel. Like one of these mackerels is what I could have used to feed my family back when I was eating fish, and they're shoveling wild fish. So to me, if you're looking at this as a sort of a bank exchange, a monetary exchange, it'd be like you're going to the bank and said, here's $14, give me $1.
It's not sustainable.
And you're just basically trading species. It doesn't make any sense at all. Mm-hmm. And then there's the idea: can you feed the fish let's say plant-based products to get them to be big? But I think you're always going to run up against the pollution. These animals are toxic. You go to the fish farms in China, and the fish farms in China are like, they go on forever. I mean, it's like forever, like for hundreds of miles. There's these stinking cesspool ponds where they're feeding most of the fish that come to America to shopping, to shoppers in America, are in these rancid, awful, foul-smelling, toxic swimming pools, and that's what that's where they're feeding the population. So I don't think there's a great way to feed a human population of 7.5 billion people, soon to be 10 billion people, with animals. Certainly not wild animals. If you look at there's some stats that came out. If you look at, how many wild animals are left on the planet, it's like 4% of the biomass, right? It's now chickens and poultry outweighs wild birds like 3 to 1 now. And I think if you look at the weight of farm animals and humanity outweighs. It's like we constitute like 96% of the biomass of mammals on the planet. The rest is wild animals. So we have this idea that there's a lot of elephants and giraffes and rhinos and other animals left, but they're not. They're nearly extinct, and it's being taken over by humanity. Or it's just taken over by this belief that we need animals to feed human beings. Mm-hmm. Like I say, it's at the nexus of everything we care about. To me, it's just become so clear that a plant-based diet is a solution to almost all the issues that we have. Mm-hmm. I can't think of one area of impact that it doesn't impact mm-hmm. somehow.
For the people that are, maybe a bit oblivious to the degradation of our planet and what's happening, you've traveled all over the world many times over. What have you seen in your travels that you would tell these people who are like, it's fine, we're good?
Oh, boy. Well, I think part of the problem is you have these, listen, I love the Attenborough specials. I love, Blue Planet and, these series, but I think it it doesn't do justice to what's really going on in the animal kingdom. Is that we keep on, as a documentarian, the nature photographers, filmmakers, they keep on chasing these smaller and smaller oases of the more of the untouched populations, and it gives us the impression that everything's fine. And you don't have to, there's something called the shifting baseline, where each generation adapts to this diminishment. And if you were to go back, I remember there's about 20 years ago, I was teaching a daughter of a guy that I know, one of my best friends, to swim down the Caribbean. And I was at a place where I remember there being clouds of fish and beautiful reef with a lot going on. And I took her. It was about 20 feet of water, and she never swam before. So it was her first time ever in deep water with a mask and a snorkel on. And we're swimming around for like 10 minutes. Nothing's there. And she starts screaming. And I look, and I thought maybe she's drowning or whatever. And she saw like an orange tang. This is just like a little pretty fish where 20 years before, I would have seen like clouds of these around in the big schools. There's one fish. And I realized she thinks that's cool. She thinks that's beautiful. And it is. But it's one fish. But, maybe the next generation would be like, oh, there's nothing here, but look, you can see in the water. Their idea of what's beautiful is completely diminished by the degradation wrought by the previous one, and that's what's going on. I remember when one of the people I met when I was filming at Fortune magazine was Jim Clark. He started Netscape, Silicon Graphics, WebMD, Shutterfly, and he's really the reason I got into filmmaking. I wanted to photograph him for a story I was doing on the information revolution for National Geographic back in 1993. I think I started it, and he was like the Steve Jobs of our generation. But I couldn't get to him. He wasn't, he was busy starting companies. And when I was working for Fortune, he was building a boat that had the world's tallest mast. And we went out to for drinks and dinner in Amsterdam, and we found out we both like to dive and like to go underwater and take pictures. And he said, "Louie, would you teach me how to be a good photographer?" And I said, "Jim, I'll teach you how to be a great one if you teach me how to be a billionaire." And
how do you do?
Well, I feel like the richest person in the world.
Nice.
In terms of, seriously, in terms of joy, I think if that's at the level he's made me the richest person in the world. Seriously, I'm not joking. I mean, he changed my life, but it's because he's the one that financed the Cove. He got me started with the Oceanic Preservation Society, but we would go around to these dive sites, and he said, "Louie, I want to take you to the best preserved site I've ever seen." And so we went to Papua New Guinea. It was a day to fly there, a day and a half sailing. He dives on the coordinates, the GPS coordinates, and comes back up, and the reef is gone. It was in rubble. You don't know what happened to it. Could have been dynamite fishing. It could have been some other event, but it's gone. And every time we went back to a new place, you see this degradation. We were in the Galapagos. It was the third time we were there, and we came up, and there was fishermen illegally fishing in a marine sanctuary. And he said, somebody should do something about this. And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, let's you and I do it." And I said, "We'll use your money and my eye, and we'll make films." Mm-hmm. And that's how this all got started. And for me, but every time we would go to these dive sites, there would be this degradation. And when I started this, I had no business of really being a filmmaker. I'd never done a film before. Even when I was working with Rick O'Berry and Taiji, when I first found out about Taiji, he said, "Why don't you come over and visit? I'm going there next week." I said, "Well, hold on, I'll catch up to you." And I took a 3-day crash course on how to make a film, and then I went to Taiji. So I was.
And then you got an Oscar. Never done a film before.
Just 3 days, people.
I've got an Oscar because I was surrounded by a lot of great people who really knew how to make a film and knew how to turn a story into something wonderful. So it really is about the team. But when this is before the Cove came out. I'm on Jim's boat. Now he has a bigger boat. It's like the world's largest private sailboat. We're down the Caribbean. and my son Sam starts playing on the beach with another kid, happens to be Steven Spielberg's kid. And so he comes over the boat because Spielberg had made Jurassic Park using my friend Jim's computers. And when I had Spielberg alone for a second, I said, Mr. Spielberg, do you have any advice for a first-time filmmaker? And he says, yeah, never make a movie involving boats or animals.
Oh,
and
no.
Of course,
You ignored him.
yeah. So when people say to me, "What do you have any advice for a new filmmaker?" I say, "Yeah, don't listen to anybody's advice."
Oh my gosh.
Have you gotten to ever run into him again, Spielberg, and say, hey?
No, but I ran into his son. One of his kids. I was with Brendan from what's
Brendan Brazier.
Brendan Brazier, and we were at he invited a few of his friends over, and one of them was one of Spielberg's kids. But we talked about that a bit. But nobody was around except Stephen and I when I said that.
That moment. One of your sons is a fisherman, a sport fisherman, I think you said. What are your all's dinner conversations like?
Oh, he's not a sport fisher. He's a fisherman. He does it for the small community. So he doesn't do it. He goes out by himself or maybe with another mate and does it. He knows how I feel. He knows what I think. And here's an odd thing. It's like he knows how I feel, and we don't talk about it that much. But there's something. I understand there's something primal about it. Like when I go down, he's down in Antigua in the West Indies, and at least it's he's not doing net fishing and something that's really, really horrible. I mean, I do understand the service that he provides with the community. There's a restaurant up above where he docks his boat, and I see him, coming up to the dock, and there's the chefs with their checkers on and the white, and he provides to them. Then he gives fish to the locals, just gives it to them, the fish that isn't marketable. And so part of me is actually kind of proud of him. Another part of me, the compassionate side, is like, man, I wish he would have something else to do. But I love my kids. And they're going to make their own choices. And I want to, it's hard to say, but I like to not have that be a source of friction. I go out to eat with my relatives, and they might eat meat, or my mom died recently, and everybody went out to like a steakhouse at one point. This is before when I went to go visit, and it's like, I just they know who I am, they know what I'm saying. Is it really my place to come in and tell them? I think the best thing we could do to our relatives, and by the way, it hurts the most with your relatives, right? Because what the consequences are. They're not going to live as long. That they're going to have, heart issues, or any amount of issues that you can count on when you eat animal products. There's going to be consequences. But I think if you're the person that keeps on, needling them, and I'd rather work by example with the people that I'm close to, and just be strong that way, and not make that a source of division. I love my family. I love my friends, and when you do that, you want to help them, right? But I think you also want to maintain your relationships, and I just keep on trying to live by an example rather than assert my belief system on that, because they know the reasons. And I know that my youngest son is mostly plant-based now. I've a lot of my relatives have changed behavior, or what they eat, because of the work that we do. But it is a source of friction. I wish I hate to say, I wish my son would find something else to do that would give him as much of a reward, but he is providing a source to the community. But it's difficult to do down in Antigua. It's hard to make a living, and I wish it could be done a different way. But I feel he'll come around. I
think that's beautiful encouragement for the listeners that are struggling with a family member, because you're spot on. Just love and appreciate and live by example.
Plus, just doing your work changes millions' diet, and if it's not the diet of those next to you, okay. But the planet as a whole is so much the better for all the work that you've done. Can you just catch us up on what you're doing now, what you're working on now, so that our audiences know what to look for next?
Yeah, no, based on the success of the Game Changers, I'm doing a series on plant-based diet. I'm calling it Food 2.0. I'm very excited by that, and this is where we have this pandemic component to it. But it's a 4-part series, maybe 5, on plant-based diet. I'm doing a film with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu based on their Book of Joy. Mm-hmm. It's really about how do you find joy in a world of sadness. It's a wonderful film, and hopefully it'll rearrange the way people think about what they think of as happiness. Happiness is, like more money, a big house, a car, power, sex, but that's like stuff that comes from outside of you. But joy is what you feel when you help other people. And we're hardwired for it. This is what Tutu and the Dalai Lama say, is that when we veer off that, off that path, we're not going to be fulfilled. And that makes sense. So if you look at anything that makes you want to wake up in the morning and makes you feel really good about yourself, to your soul, it's what, like when you're in service to other people. And by the way, that makes you feel better than probably the people that you're helping, because it's what we're hardwired to do. I'm doing a film on plastic pollution. We're just researching it right now. Working with Leilani Mutter on a film on, it's called The Fermi Paradox and the Great Filter. It's basically all the existential threats that prevent humanity from becoming, or other life forms, I should say, to expanding. And, it's really about the need to get to become an interplanetary species to save our DNA. Working on a film on female empowerment, but it's through the sport of big wave surfing. We're following 4 kick-ass surfers that got pay parity in the sport of big wave surfing, changed the whole industry. Let's see, we're doing a film on we call it The Last Place on Earth, because it's in northwestern Sumatra. It's called the Loser ecosystem. It's the last place in the world where you see tigers, elephants, rhinos, and orangutans in the wild together. But it's being decimated because of palm oil plantations, illegal palm oil plantations. But we focus in on these 4 activists that are trying to turn around. So all the other films, let me think about this, all the other films are financed. So that we just got financing for Leilani's film this last weekend. But it's really the big wave surfing film and the Loser film need financing. So if you have any deep-pocketed individuals out there, and Food 2.0 needs some help too. We're working on that, but we have enough seed money to keep on going. But it's that's it. We got a pretty full plate, and then on top of that we do these projection events, like on Racing Extinction. We did projection events of endangered species on the Empire State Building, and the Vatican had literally billions of media views. So we had planned to do some in September for the United Nations when world leaders get there. This is in conjunction with the United Nations, but because of COVID, that won't be happening. But we do these projection events where we try to get, the world aligned on these big subjects. That's it. It's a full plate. We got a lot going on. The 5 projects that are funded right now, it keeps me really have to be focused, with I want to say every minute of every day, but I've got to be thinking like I got these balls in the air. I got to keep on juggling, and it feels good. I cannot wait to wake up in the morning and do what we're doing because it feels so good.
We really appreciate you taking the time to be on this show also, between all the work that you're doing. And it's
this is a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for the hour 15 we stole from you. I know you're going to help our listeners a lot.
This is it. This is great. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for everything that you're doing out there to push things forward.
You bet.
Thank you. Thank you
all
so
right.
much,
Thank
Louie.
you. Cheers.
Bye.
Talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.